We all make mistakes. Failures are the best teachings for us moving forward. There are no perfect parents. They're just willing people who want to do their best every day. And when someone says you could do better, to try to do better moving forward so that the kids can do better.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you're tuning into the Taking Good Care show. I'm Dr. Andrew Wong, based in Toronto, Canada.
And I'm Dr. David St. Arnaud, based in Edmonton, Canada. We're two practicing psychologists with over a decade of experience each, working in a variety of settings and supporting diverse populations.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. While we're both practicing psychologists, our podcast is intended purely for educational and entertainment purposes. It's not a substitute for professional mental health care or treatment. If you're in need of support, we strongly encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health professional in your area.
Good morning.
Good afternoon here in Toronto. Time difference.
Well, and we are very lucky today to have a special guest. Miss Sharon Smith is a psychologist based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, with over 25 years of experience in providing psychotherapeutic interventions for families, couples, individuals, youth, and children. She has a specialization in high conflict, separation, divorce, co-parenting, parent-child reunification, and family therapy. If you're not familiar with these terms, just hang out. We will get to them. She just really, in short, she helps families navigate some really tough situations, emotionally charged situations, to best serve, the kids in the family and everyone involved. So Ms. Smith is recognized as a parenting expert in the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta and has extensive experience in providing court-ordered, post-divorce, high-conflict, evaluative and therapeutic interventions for children, parents, and families. She also has years of experience providing clinical supervision and teaching at the university level. She has also been active in professional leadership, including serving as the president of the Alberta chapter of the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, AFCC, and numerous conference presentations. Ms. Smith also happens to be one of my esteemed colleagues that I have had the pleasure of getting to know and working with since she's joined our office here at Glenora Registered Psychologist. What really stands out is her ability to combine her profound clinical expertise with a practical, direct, compassionate approach, helping make complex family challenges a little easier to navigate. Also, I wasn't sure if she wanted me to mention this, but actually she shares this with all her clients, that she personally has gone through her own divorce and co-parenting and now exists in a blended family system. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that, but it's not just an academic or clinical approach. It's really a heartfelt approach that has been personally meaningful to her. So Ms. Smith can be found at www.glenora.net. And I just want to say welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to scratch the Court of Queen's Bench and insert Court of King's Bench so that we are current in celebrating, I believe it is God Save the King at this point in our history
Thank you
of
for
colonization.
Thank you for being with us today, Sharon.
Well, thanks for having me. This is fun and exciting for an older clinician like myself to be invited by the mid-career clinicians into this first for me of doing a podcast.
And off the air, I was saying that I'm really excited for this conversation because I work with a number of children and teenagers. And of course, when we work with children, we have to work with their caregivers and parents as well. But having said that, I don't work within the field of high conflict divorce. Obviously, I will have families who come to me with separated parents and caregivers, but certainly we do know that there are some very high conflict separations out there.
I think the statistics that are thrown around in the family law multidisciplinary community are really less than 20% of families who go through a separation or a divorce end up in what is dubbed high conflict, which is in itself a very complex construct to look at because there's not just one form of high conflict. It might be less than 20% of the population, but it demands a great deal of resources at all levels, these families who are high conflict. And I think that even when we work in supporting children and youth, we have to hold the lens of the family system that they are walking into our office or our classroom with, because we don't walk around just as tabula rasa. We are affected, not blank slates. We are affected by the family and the community that we grow up in.
Yeah, Sharon, I was actually the origins or the idea for this topic was quite personal. It was a listener that had approached me and that I'd recently met, and she said, "Hey, can you do a podcast on this topic?" Because it was personally meaningful to her. And so I just think there's not a lot of resources or information available to the general public, right? If you can't afford a lot of the paid resources. So I'm really happy to be able to bring this to the general public. And I'm curious in terms of like wherever you want to take this, like what this would look like for a family or what kind of tips or suggestions you might have for anyone who's struggling with co-parenting after a separation or a divorce.
Yeah, thanks, David. We were talking in the preamble before we started recording about our awareness that our clients from time to time say to us, I wish I had started here instead of starting with a lawyer. Lawyers are a very important aspect of helping restructure families from one household into two households. But the bulk of the work that occurs when you're moving from one household into two households as you separate from a relationship is emotional work. And I think that if parents knew that they can engage with competent, well-trained mental health professionals, right from how do we tell the children? Are we making the right decision? How do we make sure the children are front and foremost still of this family? Because although relationships can end and sometimes do end, families cannot end. Families need to be restructured when the parents' relationship ends. And those families often then become restructured again when parents meet new partners and blend in a new partner and sometimes new children. We get layers and layers and layers of wonderfulness and complexity that needs to be managed by all the people in the family from what I like to talk about from the bottom up. When we're thinking about families and family systems, our lens needs to focus from the bottom up. I'm thrilled that in the past, I think it's a little less than 10 years, the Canadian government has gotten much more clear on insisting that decisions around families that are going through separation and divorce must use the lens of the best interest of the child.
Mhm.
And many precedents in courts across our country have excellent decisions that have incorporated the information that's being provided through mental health support systems around families going through separation and divorce. So that's the approach I always take in my work clinically, and it's the approach I'm going to take here, is always remembering that we're coming from the bottom up. When we're talking about making parenting plans, we're looking at the youngest child in that family system and what would be in their best interest.
So interesting. I wish the listeners could see just Dave and I just nodding the whole time you were like, you were talking there, Sharon. Because I think we're in the line of work that we do, I think we're all in agreement that, that is best practice. When you say restructuring, Sharon, you use that word a few times there. And sort of the image that I got, and I'm sort of coming from the lens of the listener, is sort of like, okay, we're gonna move around some chess pieces here. This is how we're going to restructure the chessboard. But I'm wondering for you, when you talk about restructuring, especially restructuring from the bottom up, what do you mean by restructure? How do you define that?
I love your analogy of moving around chess pieces, actually, because that's absolutely what we're doing is we are making sure that we are maintaining the boundaries and the hierarchies that research in family therapy tells us are in the best interests of the children that exist in that family. So the constructs of the specific terms of restructuring the family system, they're seated in one of the pioneer family therapy theories, which is structural family therapy, which was pioneered by Dr. Salvador Minuchin. And so any nerds like me who want to find out more about that are encouraged to look up his name. I am going to use that term frequently here because families cannot end. We restructure that family system through the difficult emotional upheaval of the grief work of the parents ending their relationship, which affects every single member in that family system. And so, if we're truly coming from the bottom up, we're holding the needs, the developmental, emotional, safety needs of the youngest child front and foremost in the lens of our thinking about how we're helping this family restructure from what was living in one home to what is living now in two homes. There's a great resources I wanted to get in throughout this podcast because I did mention I'm a nerd. So the first one I want to talk about is a book for the actual parents who are ending their relationship. And this is a book by the title Rebuilding, and that is written by Bruce Fisher. And it is a terrific lock key step understanding to the emotional impacts of the grief of the difficult choice to end a relationship with your co-parent. Nobody arrives here overnight. Nobody arrives here easily. It is a very painful, emotionally tumultuous process that the parents are going through. The other book that I wanted to talk about that really helps understand this construct of restructuring term is a book by Dr. Robert Emery, and that book is titled Two Homes, One Childhood, which I think is an incredibly helpful, evocative title to help people understand that we don't end these children's narrative of their childhood just because the parents need to exist in two separate homes.
As you were talking about it, Sharon, I I just got this like image about, I think families are going to restructure regardless, right? Like these it is going to restructure when parents separate, the family is restructuring. But by meeting with a mental health professional who has resources and understanding about this, it can be a lot more intentional, right? Like you were saying, how do we tell the kids? When do we tell the kids? Do we stay in the same home for a while or do we move out? Like all of these decisions should be made quite intentionally with the child's best interest in mind, if I'm following you right.
You are absolutely following me right. If I had a dime for every time that parents were sent to me through a court orders and they told me I should have started here. And so, yes, starting early and getting into a qualified mental health expert's office right from the time that you're beginning to consider separating as parents is imperative for the best interest of your children being able to navigate this. Going through your parents' separation and divorce is considered a 1 point out of 10 on an instrument that we use to understand the impact of childhood on adults called the Adverse Childhood Experience Questionnaire. And so parents who want to make sure that they do this, focusing on the best interest of their children, are wise to engage a mental health expert right from the beginning in gaining support on how to talk to the children, how to make decisions that focus on all of the emotional, developmental and community needs that the children have as their family is being restructured.
Sharon, does mental health in all of this and the separation piece, from your experience, does it get lost in the process? Because when I do work with families who are going through the process or thinking about it, at all the different stages, some of them get so wrapped up in the 1 to step 5, the logical process, I guess you can say, or the rational process of like, gotta find a lawyer. Okay, need to sell the house, divvy up finances. When do the kids go to one caregiver versus the other? I hear all of that. But does the mental health piece in your experience sometimes get pushed to the back burner?
Both of you gentlemen know that being a psychologist becomes ingrained in who we are in the world. There's no such separate thing as Sharon the person and Sharon the psychologist. And so, as you were talking about the emotional needs of divorce, I noticed your breath was quickening as you were sharing things from probably your own clinical work with these families, is that it's mostly emotional aspects that need to be sorted out. You can't separate them from the details of how do we tell the children, how do we get to homes, where are we going to live, how are we going to do the lock key step details of co-parenting from the feelings of the grief that the entire family system is going through. It underlines all of the decision making that needs to be done in moving from a one home family system to a two home family system.
Does that grief, and I love that you're using the word grief, Sharon. Does that grief ever show up as other emotions, i.e., anger?
To all the psychologists listening, we know that underneath most angry defensive communications are other important emotions like grief and fear and sadness, which are occurring not only in the parents who have adult experience of dealing with these emotions, but they're also occurring for and in the children who do not have adult experiences of managing these heavy emotions. There we go. That matches the sigh that I had
Mhm.
as I was talking about them.
Yeah, and I often remind myself that not everyone in this family system is at the same stage in their grief, right? So if one parent chose to leave and they've been thinking about this for years and they've already planned a lot of this out in their head, they might be in a far different place than the parent who just found out that they were served papers and are getting a divorce and are now trying to make sense of it. And then the kids, right? Sometimes the kids are like, it's about time, right? We've heard our parents fighting for a long time. We knew this was coming, and now it's finally happening. Or other kids that are just like, no, no, this can't happen. This cannot happen in my family. So just, I don't know if you can speak to that or how you navigate like where different people are at, and they might all be in the same room with you.
Yeah, I believe, if memory serves me correct, you're actually referring to constructs discussed in Fisher's book about that you can't have two levers and you can't have two left. And so when a relationship ends, there's generally a lever and a left. And they draw a diagram where the lever is often the one emotionally processing on a great scale prior to coming to this decision of talking about initiating conversation about separation. And sometimes the left is completely gobsmacked and taken aback by this information. The reality is, while that's going on in the one home where the children reside, it is not possible to insulate the children from perceiving their parents' emotional responses or reactions to the grief that they're going through. Because children spend the first 24 months of their lives perfecting their emotional communication with their caregivers. We do this to survive as humans because it's rare that humans have the ability to converse prior to that 2 years mark. And so that's always our primary language of understanding with our families of origin and our caregivers. So when parents are going through the distress, whether they're the leaver or the left, of the grief of ending the relationship and restructuring the family, there's a period of time where I remember not being okay, not being sure that the other parent was okay, or sometimes being absolutely clear that the other parent was not okay either. And it was impossible in one household to completely insulate our child from that. It affects the children, and the children don't always have the emotional capacity or wherewithal to be able to regulate in the emotions. So what happens is these children can become enacted into the conflict between the parents by emotionally co-regulating with and for either one or another parent, or with the changing relationship between the parents. When children become hypervigilant on their parents' relationship within the parents or between the parents, in order to get there, we have to abandon ourself. So you imagine that little children have to leave their survival skills of how am I feeling and start focusing on, wait a sec, what's going on between my mom, my dad, or my mom and my mom, and my dad and my dad? What's going on between my parents? How are they feeling? What's going on within them? And children can get stuck in this place where they're emotionally co-regulating for and with their parent or parents. And it sets them up for really bad peer choices, no matter what age they are. That these children on the playground or when they hit junior high and high school and start looking to make those peer relationships or potential partner choices would be more open and vulnerable to people who are emotionally needy or emotionally abusive in relationship, not because it's comfortable, but because it's familiar. When children aren't attended to and the structure of the family isn't honored, they aren't insulated through a healthy generational boundary from what is adult content and adult conflict, it can set the stage for a lot of emotional, behavioral, and academic struggles in these children.
Wow. To what you just said, Sharon, it resonates to what you had said closer to the beginning of our conversation that children don't stop growing up. Children continue to develop irrespective of what's happening in the home. Time doesn't stop, development doesn't stop. And from what you just said right now, the importance of learning how to regulate their emotions. I'm also like some of the words that came to mind was, the parentified child, right? The child who may grow up too quickly, or even the lonely child, the child who may feel neglected or, not given the appropriate attention. So I'm just wondering, does that ever occur when their needs are not tended to, their emotional needs are not tended to?
Absolutely. So let's unpsychobabble these
Sure.
terms that we're babbling about. We do tend to talk about them, and we're all clinicians on this call. So I think the reason I was excited for the invitation is with the broader audience of being able to reach out to families that are actually going through this struggle. So
Yep.
we do talk about two types of impacts of children when parents are not holding a good generational boundary around what is adult content in conflict and what is child content in conflict. So we can set up a stage when children are not insulated, which means they don't hear it all. I talk to my co-parents about you are entitled to go through your grief and your upset and everything you are experiencing as you move through this process. You are also entitled to get support from your community support network. But that support needs to be after the children are in bed, on your cell phone, in your car, in your garage, with a baby monitor beside you if you have a baby. Because children's emotional reading of the parents will invite them to wake up in the middle of the night when their parent is going through all of the difficulties of restructuring their family, and they will sneak out of their bedrooms and they will listen to these conversations. So it can be unintentional and it can sometimes be intentional when we don't remember to keep that generational boundary and get adult support from adult caregivers. And we start talking about to our children about, your other parent. Oh my gosh, your other parent. We are actually inducting these children into the adult realm above that generational boundary. So when we expose children to adult information about content of the conflict, we are adultifying them. We are placing on them the burden of adult awareness that they are not developmentally ready for. The biological science that we have available to us now identifies that it's not until about the age of 15 that the average human starts developing that frontal lobe, which is that executive functioning thinking or adult understanding of the world. And that's not complete, scientists tell us at this point, until about the age of 25. So even though they can legally make decisions at 18, they are not emotionally and developmentally and cognitively really ready for that adult information. So we have to work together to keep childhood safe, childhood fun, childhood friendly by keeping kids clean from adult content and not making them little adults. Andrew, you mentioned the parentified child. This is slightly different
Mm.
from allowing our children to experience the content or of the conflict. It's when we don't create the boundary of emotional safety. When I'm talking, I'm often thinking about the adage of success in real estate. It's location, location, location. Well, in separation and divorce, it's boundaries, 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 which puts you squarely in structural family therapy. So I've already talked a lot about the generational boundary when we insulate children from adult content of any conflict related to the separation. The next really important boundary to be mindful of is my personal emotional boundary. This is really getting into Taylor Swifting, My Life with My Co-Parent. She's got a great song that was released a while ago that talks about, I don't love you. I don't hate you. I'm just indifferent. This is how we help ensure that our children are not parentified, which, yes, can lead to the lonely child, the anxious child, the disruptive child, the depressed child. So when we do a good job of vaulting off, almost like Ghostbusters, sucking our emotional feelings about our co-parent in and creating a healthy, safe space for the child to be able to hold their own feelings, first and foremost about themselves, and then how they feel about both of their parents. We are loving our children. We are, as Dr. John Gottman talks about in his book, Raising an Emotionally Healthy Child, The Heart of Parenting. We are creating the safe, developmentally appropriate space where children are dealing with emotions and thoughts and behaviors that are appropriate to their developmental age. They're not being rushed. They're not being hurried to grow up and emotionally caretake their parent. I think I probably want to strengthen this with an example. I think it's about probably the best example I can give from my own life is not greeting my child when they're transitioning back into my parenting time with, oh, are you okay? How was it? That's about my feelings about their other parent, as opposed to when I'm child-centered in restructuring my family, I'm going, tell me about what you did with your other parent. Not probing questions, but just a general inquiry that's child-friendly and appropriate. You've been out of contact with me for several days. I'm curious what you did. how are you? Not, can you take care of how I am? We know that parents are not okay as they're transitioning. All right, I'm going to slow down and let you guys ask questions.
Well, actually, I'm thinking of something that I've seen a bit of, and I just want to say, like, for all the parents, co-parents that are feeling guilt or that they've ruined their child's life already, it's never too late to get help and get support, and even for your children, right? But a lot of this can happen like not maliciously, not like I'm trying to make my co-parent look terrible or ruin the relationship between, the other parent and the child. It's like, I'm really sad. I'm sad about this person leaving me, and I have tears, and sometimes they come out when the kids are around, right? And in my office, I'll kind of be like, well, of course, like you can be sad, and what do you think the child feels when you're doing that, right? And sometimes the child gets the message that mom or dad is hurting mom or dad, right? That the pain that one parent is feeling is being caused by the other parent. And all of a sudden, there can be this narrative starting to create that, like, poor mom or poor dad, because this other adult is hurting them. And then, like, all of these relationships get rearranged or restructured. Again, not maliciously or with a lot of intent. It's just accidentally these things can happen. And I think the more awareness we have around that, we can do what you're saying, insulate the children from it by getting our own supports, right? And letting them know that even if you are sad, that you are dealing with it, you are getting help for it, that they don't have to take care of your sad feelings about your relationship. Sorry, I'm getting on a bit of a soapbox now, so jump in and tell me to shut up.
Well, there's a famous quote that has been put on a number of my colleagues' email signatures that talks about the importance of never letting your hatred for your co-parents supersede your love for your children. Children don't come into existence out of hatred. They come into existence generally out of loving relationships and a desire to expand that loving relationship into the love that we can bring and share and surround our children with. And so I think that if we can remember that if we have to lead with always, we had these children out of love. We need to continue to let them see our respective love for them and let that supersede how we might feel about our co-parent. That's keeping that personal boundary. So I talked about the emotional boundary you keep around your own heart and feelings about the other parent. There's also an importance to keep personal boundaries in healthy, restructured families. So this is how, again, we insulate children from adult content and adult conflict. And we support children with the fact that they do all the heavy lifting in restructured family systems. I had the privilege of being able to not be triggered by, sharing the same cutlery and or pillowcases as my other parent when we made the choice to separate into two homes. The children don't actually have that privilege. The children have to continue to go between each parent's home. And again, remember that their primary language is reading and knowing what that parent is feeling, because that's what they learn in the first 24 months of their lives. So in order to help children in effective co-parenting, we have good personal boundaries between the two sides of the homes that the children's childhood is made up now. To avoid historical conflict or new conflict being ignited, only personal information that is going to impact our children is shared between the two sides of the household. So we're not asking questions about, is your other parent dating? Is your other parent still working here? Did your other parent do this? What did the other parent cook you for lunch? Did they remember to put your yogurt in your school lunch? We're not asking questions like that. The term divorce duplex, I think, actually was coined by one of our colleagues, Dr. St. Arnaud, and that was Dr. Stephen Carter. I love it. Because when we think of living in a duplex, we are sharing walls between us and our neighbor. And so an example I like to talk to parents about is I may be the best horticulturist and grow award-winning roses. But that does not give me any right when I live in a duplex to tell my neighbor where to plant their roses. And I think that we can be stuck in the old relationship instead of starting a new relationship about what is actually our purview to know or tell each other as parents. Anything that will personally impact the children, things like a family friend or family member on my side may take ill, or there may be a new baby born in my family system. This is information that I'm going to be talking with that's going to flow between the children's two homes. Something as simple as that, or something as difficult as I'm going to introduce my new partner to our children, is information that will affect the children that have to flow between the two homes, doing all the heavy lifting of this new two household model. It's important for parents to be able to share that information in a succinct way with their co-parent to help them be able to manage their emotions that might occur about this. Learning that someone that used to be part of their extended family may be ill is going to have an impact on me as a person. I want to be able to regulate, manage that, and take care of not looking gobsmacked in front of the children. And I certainly don't want the children being the one running between homes with important information. So in healthy functioning co-parenting, we're communicating important information with our co-parent directly, not through the children. Two great books written by Bill Eddy to help parents in learning how to get to this indifference of the business relationship of co-parenting. One of them is called BIF, which stands for Brief, Informative, Factual, and Friendly. And the other one is called So What's Your Proposal? And these really help us move out of that old emotion-laden way of interacting with our co-parent and moving into the business relationship of how to communicate with our co-parent.
Within your practice, Sharon, what you said so far, like all of that resonates so much with even, the work that I do with some of my clients. But when you work with the families directly, I know like in terms of the theory, like this all sounds really, really great and ideal. However, when you are dealing like what you said before with the levers and you can't have two lefts, how much of the work that you do is it with the entire family and how much of it is to help each parent? So perhaps doing some individual work with each to understand where they are in this whole process. Because everybody's going to have different personalities, different stages of that grief that you spoke about. How, I guess, how easy and how difficult, and maybe that's too simplistic of me to mention it that way, but how easy or how difficult is it to get everybody on that same page? Or is that even the goal?
That is the goal for the co-parenting relationship in particular. And so I meet with my co-parents individually initially because everybody needs a chance to feel understood on their perceptions. And that's sort of their one time to let me know the emotional aspect of where they're at and coming into co-parenting counseling with me. And then I let them know that the co-parenting work is something that is between them and that's going to require shifts and changes for them to be able to get onto the same page. There's a famous show, it's an older show called The War of the Roses, and it's about a divorcing set of parents who destroy the house. And when you're destroying the house, figuratively and literally, you're destroying the childhood as well. And so I really like to frame this for my co-parents as that the war that has resulted in the choice to end the relationship must not continue because it will induct the children into soldiering in that war. That coming to see your mental health professional or doing this right to the best of your ability is about starting the peace talks. The peace talks and scripting a new narrative for the children's family. Remember, relationships can end, families cannot. And so we are writing a new story. And so sometimes I'm inviting and encouraging parents to start thinking about a joint narrative of an apology to those children, because we all make mistakes. Failures are the best teachings for us moving forward. And when you're invested in being a good parent, you want to be a good role model. So being able to acknowledge your part in the responsibility of the deterioration of the relationship that results in separation, being able to just take stock into when a mental health professional provides you information about this is not a good boundary. You don't have a good emotional boundary about how you feel about your co-parent. You are violating personal boundaries of the business relationship of co-parenting. Or my most upsetting is you have not withheld a generational boundary across the two homes of these children's childhood. That's just an opportunity to take responsibility, to own it, to apologize to children for having not been able to be my best, and to make every effort to move forward being the best parent I can be. There are no perfect parents. There are just willing people who want to do their best every day. And when someone says you could do better, to try to do better moving forward so that the kids can do better. So getting on the same page is imperative. I work in teams. If one parent is really struggling individually and that's making it difficult for them to be in the co-parenting counseling relationship, I will absolutely rely on the experts in my community who are familiar with these constructs. You want someone who understands family systems theory, because if you send an individual parent to someone who only holds an individualistic lens for them, they might get caught up into co-regulating, just like we're trying to stop the children from doing, and be very supportive and very empathic, but perhaps not inviting their parent to do the shifts and changes that are necessary to healthy, effective co-parenting.
Which I think kind of brings up a question that a lot of co-parents out there might be thinking, like, I'm on board with this. This all makes sense for me. I want to do this, but my partner or my ex-partner is not on board, right? And is pushing back or resisting or being difficult, which kind of leads to some of the maybe court-ordered interventions that you do a lot of. And so maybe just talk to parents about the option that might be available to them.
That's a great segue into a point I wanted to make, which is we get on hyper alert when we go through grief. And that hyper alertness can look or sound like finding demons under rocks instead of recognizing that it's just a rock. What I mean by that is that children go through normal developmental challenges all the time. We call them the terrible twos, and we have many other descriptive names for different developmental stages that children go through. Those developmental changes are hard on the children and they're hard on the parents. And so I think it's really important, if you have issues with your co-parent getting on the same page or being willing to recognize that some co-parenting counseling may be beneficial to the restructuring of the children's family, is to be able to have that business-like conversation from the resources I mentioned early that focuses on your observations of the developmental needs of the children. So we may be just seeing a rock, which is this child is having their own emotional process to the grief of the family being restructured and the relationship between the parents ending. But they are demonstrating meltdowns, maybe at daycare, maybe at one parent's home, maybe at both parents' home, maybe at transition. Of course they are. They are in an untenable situation, these children. Children love parent A and parent B. It is difficult then for them to conceptualize my time with parent A is up and I need to now go to parent B. Oh, wait a second. I really love parent B. I'm really enjoying my time. It's up. I need to go back to parent A. This is distressing and difficult for these little humans. And so to invite your co-parent through a nice, clear, business-like email to say, I noticed at transition that our child was upset, dysregulated, struggling, clinging, unhappy. We want us to work together for the best interest of our child is a great invitational way to bring someone into talking about co-parenting. Court orders do not make good parents. Any judge will tell you that. Parents make good parents. Court orders are put in place when parents can't exit the War of the Roses and enter into the peace talks that commit to the love of their children and the desire that that love brings of helping these children be healthy, happy, well-adjusted children in all of their aspects of community. I think it's important for both professionals listening to this podcast and parents to talk to their professionals about is that when you're doing this kind of work, I always at the beginning read through my civility agreement of how we're going to treat each other. I'm the one who reminds the parents about the business relationship of co-parenting. I'm also very mindful. I'm a trauma-informed therapist. And so just like when Andrew's breathing was speeding up when he was talking about the trauma he hears on his caseload, we all feel that as well-tuned trauma-informed therapists when our clients aren't doing okay in sessions. So I will identify, does anybody need a break? I handle breaks to not get triangulated, which means picking sides in the war in my office by inviting the parent that wants the break to go take a breath, go to the bathroom, walk around, do what you need to do with self-care to regulate, to come back to the process. The parent that didn't ask for the break stays in my office, and I go sit in the waiting room, quite frankly, because I need to get back to a grounded space to be able to show up for these parents and help them restructure their family. And I never let my parents leave my office together. I ask them to volunteer from session to session who will stay behind for 5 minutes in the waiting room and allow the other parent to clear not only the office and the elevator, but the sidewalk in front of my building. And that's because we're speaking about very emotionally laden material of the resources of this family, which is the jewels that the children are.
Sharon, you mentioned the power of observations and to communicate observations. And it really spoke to me about, leaving out the judgment, right? And being able to point out certain observations that one caregiver may be concerned about, but not interpreting those observations for the other person.
Yeah, you're dialing right into the Biff book, which I'm not sure if you've read, Andrew, that I mentioned earlier, which is all co-parenting communication needs to be business oriented. It's not about your interpretation, as you said, your opinions or your assumptions about the child's behavior. When I'm writing a co-parenting email to my co-parent, it's simply the facts about our children that I might have that the other parent may not have, or the questions about our children that I may need to know from the other parent. So I encourage parents when they're communicating with their co-parent, first and foremost, use email. It's the best way to try to make it as emotionless as possible. Use point forms, which reduces emotions even further. If your co-parent isn't able to get to that place because of where they might be at in the lever or left situation, something that nobody's ever written about, but I teach parents to do, is to take that email that they receive from their co-parent and copy it into a Word document. Wait till the children are in bed. Use all your self-care practices to make sure you're okay, and then open that document, but don't start reading it from the top down because it can emotionally trigger you. Read it from the bottom up. If the last sentence in your co-parent's email to you does not contain a fact about the children or a question about the children that you should respond to, simply erase it. Work your way up to the top of the email. You'll have a bit of a Swiss cheese document, but will have protected yourself from the old emotional triggers. We can't not know the old emotional triggers from a relationship with our co-parent. We're always going to know them, but this is a way to practice that vaulting off that I talked about of those emotional triggers. So when you get your Swiss cheese of sentences that contain the facts about the children or the questions about their children, simply print it out and reply to your co-parent's email just with that. You need to look in your own yard. I think we get too busy looking in our co-parents' yard at them behaving as the best citizens they can, instead of making sure, am I showing up and taking the high road? And in this moment, acting as the best co-parent I can be with those emotional boundaries and personal boundaries and generational boundaries that insulate and protect our children, help them to grow to be amazing individuals that know the definition of their family instead of bruised and broken and battered soldiers of their parents' war.
Yeah, I'm nodding along the whole way. And what just came up
I
for me
think we
as you were,
both are, Dave.
okay,
We both are nodding along the way.
I was just thinking, like, to be able to gift the children with the ability to love both their parents, right? And not have to choose sides, not have to get involved in the war like you're talking about, right? And how do we do that? Again, it's really hard when you're emotionally triggered, right? And so having a third person or a third party or several third parties involved, there's even like our family wizard, which is a resource that you can communicate through that helps monitor the emotional level of communication. I've even heard a client recently using AI and instructing AI to remove the emotion, make it business-like, and make it brief. And I'm like, that's really good, right? And that'll only take 1 or 2 minutes, right? And it's free. So you can really start to clean up and work on the communication that is essential for these kids, right? There has to be communication. So I'm getting a whole bunch of little nuggets in terms of what you're saying, but I'm also just appreciating the overall sentiment that you are bringing to this work, right? It's obvious how much you hold the children's best interest front and center when you're working with these families and these parents.
Now I'm the one doing the head nodding. I just want to restructure. I liked your choice of the word to gift the children with healthy co-parenting and the right to love both of their parents as their family is restructured. It's not just a gift, it is their right. It is their right that is supported in the intention of the Divorce Act that talks about the best interests of the children. It is a primary right that children are entitled to have a healthy, loving relationship with both their parents when the parents' relationship stops. I want to drive home one point that I have that I like to talk to parents about this. It's not enough to take the high ground of getting to the point of hearing my invitation to move into peace talks versus war. It's not enough to stop negatively talking within earshot about your co-parent. Children invariably know that they are a reflection genetically of the makeup of their parents, even if they're not the biological children. They know they are a reflection of the nurturing environment that they are growing up in with these two parents. We know we are a reflection of our parents when we're out there in the world. And so when children are in one parent's home, hearing negative characterizations, either by their parent, friends, and family members of their other parent, they're quietly thinking to themselves, am I bad too? When we have this going on in both parents' home because the parents are more invested in war than peace talks, we've got children who are going, well, parent A is all bad, so I must be bad. Wait a second, parent B is also all bad, so I am doubly bad. And we are removing what is a basic human right to feel okay and good and solid about myself and who I am and how I'm showing up in the world. So we decrease the possibility of our children having healthy self-esteem and having a healthy self-concept by smearing the mirror that is necessary for them in their other parent. How we discover who we are in the world is by being able to see ourselves reflected back in a healthy mirror. And if I'm jeopardizing that, so it's not enough just to stop. Healthy co-parents go the extra mile. They actually remember once the grief period is done, and according to movie and fiction characters, it takes about 2 years to get over that. When I've reestablished a healthy sense of self, I can get back to the place of being able to recognize in my children the traits that they bring to their family that are reflective of the other parent. And I can actually point that out and I can celebrate. You have a very sharp sense of wit. You are so clever and so good with observing things. That's just like your other parent. I am just heaping health upon my child when I am supporting them, seeing in themselves all of the healthy attributes that they have gained from exposure to each of their parents.
I don't know if we can top that.
I know.
I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking we're kind of getting close to our time and we could probably keep going for another hour or two. And I'm guessing a lot of the listeners, especially those that have that personal experience with this topic, have been nodding along. And it's nice to hear this explained in a way that's really digestible and affirming, I think. I think we all want the best for kids, right? And yes.
I think even though we could go for another 2 hours, like even I know Dave said nuggets of knowledge. I'm thinking like boulders of knowledge that, even though I've been in this field, more than a decade, like this is like personal professional development for me right now. Just to hear it in a different way, Sharon, and the way you present it is like Dave says, so digestible. But I think like we've gone for an hour, I'm assuming, but like even letting the listeners process all of this information, right? Really even re-listening to it, understand it, really comprehend it, how powerful some of these messages that Sharon has shared with us today. So Dave and I do this thing, Sharon, close to the end of an episode, we ask each other, what's our takeaway? And I'm gonna ask Dave, if you can sum up a takeaway. I'm sure we can come up with like a dozen takeaways, but one of the most important takeaways for you today.
I heard a thing recently that was like, work on your own relationship with yourself and that'll benefit your relationship with your children. And I don't like my sense from everything that we've been talking about today, it's like almost this collective healing as a community that are trying to, heal and grow and develop, that the more work we can do for ourselves and getting support, the support we need, especially people that have expertise in this area that actually aren't going to make things worse, right? By trying to be really helpful, sometimes it can make things worse. So again, I'm just like, I want to continue this. I want to further this. I think we need another episode, but I'm thinking about all the people that have been affected, have been impacted by their own parents, separation or divorce, or right. Like this is going to be, I think it's going to be an emotional listen for a lot of people. And I want you to take care of yourself and to get the support that you need and know that there are people out there that can support in this area. So you're hearing from one of them and I think you'll just have a better sense of what you might be looking for if you're trying to find that.
Yeah. And for me, my takeaway, I was thinking about this, within the last 5 minutes here, just if you work with children, if you work with families in any capacity, whether you are a psychologist, social worker, teacher, physician, you're bound to come across children, families, adults who are going through things. You have to listen to this, right? You have to understand like all the different little pieces that that were mentioned about grief, about restructuring from the bottom up, about the right for children to develop emotionally healthy. Like all of these things, if you work with people, this has to be a listen.
Do I get last words too?
Absolutely.
You get the last word.
You know, Dave, you tied right into what my last comments were going to be. I read an excellent book quite a long time ago that was a joint effort of two PhD in psychology and a PhD in sociology called The Narcissistic Epidemic. And something that they looked at was comparing on the impact of the last 3 or 4 decades of how we raise children. Something that stuck out for me, and I'm cautiously talking about the artist that wrote this song, is that when I was a young person, there was a song written to deal with famine that was striking all of Africa called Heal the World, Make It a Better Place for you and for me and for the entire human race. And as I was trying to come up with my concluding thoughts that I typed in my notes, I am always struck by how polarized our world is right now and how children are impacted by that on every level because of their access to the World Wide Web and their access to their caregivers, whether they're teachers or parents or babysitters that are affected by polarization. And so I liked what you said, Dave, is that really the message I want to send home is that yes, definitely work on healing yourself. And as adults, work together about creating healthy communities for children. And healthy communities are achievable for children in two-parent households, as well as in one-parent households. When we look at the simple ideas that were put forward in Minuchin's constructs of structural family therapy, which are healthy boundaries, and healthy hierarchies in family systems and in systems at large. And maybe we can get back to that, healing the world instead of polarizing it. Don't polarize the children. Bring them into
No,
peace talks.
Yeah. Yeah.
no, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Sharon, thank you so much for taking your time and being with us today. This was such an enlightening conversation, so much knowledge, so much to absorb and think about. And really, truly, we appreciate your time for having this conversation. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, if you're enjoying the podcast, please follow, subscribe, like, and leave us comments. We always like to hear feedback. And all of this just helps us to keep producing our podcast. So again, Sharon, thank you so much and take good care.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.